I pulled into the employee parking lot of Wonderland Park 15 minutes early for my first night shift. The park had closed to visitors 3 hours ago, but the light still burned bright against the evening sky, casting long shadows across the empty walkways. Amusement parks always felt different after hours. All that engineered joy sitting unused, waiting for the next day's crowds. I needed this job. Summer security guard wasn't exactly a dream position, but it paid $12 an hour for basically sitting around all night. That money would make a serious dent in next semester's textbooks. I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and headed toward the staff entrance. Melvin Allen, the day shift security manager, waited by the door. He looked like he'd been doing this job way too long. Permanent bags under his eyes, a coffee stain on his uniform shirt, and the kind of forced cheerfulness that comes from dealing with tourists all day. "Stanley, right on time." He clapped me on the shoulder and ushered me inside. "Let me show you the office. Not much to it, really." We walked past darkened food stalls and silent game booths. The place had that empty fairground smell, lingering fried food and cotton candy mixed with cleaning chemicals. "Most nights are dead quiet," Melvin said as we approached a small building near the center of the park. "Just keep an eye on the cameras. Make sure no kids try to sneak in after hours. You know how it is." The security office was barely bigger than my dorm room. A desk with a swivel chair faced a wall of 6 monitors, each showing a different area of the park. A mini fridge hummed in the corner next to a microwave that had seen better days. "Bathroom's through there," Melvin pointed to a door at the back. "Coffee maker works if you need it. Wi-Fi password is on the sticky note under the keyboard." I nodded along as he went through the basics. Emergency contacts, where the breaker box was located, which doors to check were locked. Standard stuff. Oh, and one more thing. Melvin reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The night shift rules. He handed it to me with a strange little laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Rules?" I asked, unfolding the paper. "Yeah, just some guidelines for the night shift." He laughed again, that same nervous chuckle. "Nothing major." I looked down at the list, typed in plain black text. 1. Ignore the Ferris wheel after 12:30 a.m. Do not look at it on the monitors. 2. If you see a man in a red baseball cap outside the main gate, call the police immediately. 3. If you see a child standing near the carousel, turn off all monitors for exactly 2 minutes. 4. Do not open the door for a woman looking for her son. 5. Do open the door for a tall man in a dark suit who doesn't speak. He isn't human, but he's allowed inside. 6. Leave the park by 3 a.m. No exceptions. I looked up at Melvin, waiting for the punchline. Is this some kind of joke? "Just follow the rules, kid." He smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. Makes the job easier. Before I could ask anything else, he checked his watch. "Gotta run. My wife's making lasagna tonight." He headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and the cameras sometimes glitch. Don't worry about it. If anything looks weird, it's probably just the system acting up." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the small office with the list of bizarre rules. I sat down in the chair, spinning around once before facing the monitors. Each screen showed a different section of the park. Main entrance, Ferris wheel, carousel, water slides, bumper cars, and the food court, all empty and quiet. I pulled out the list again and read through it more carefully. This had to be some kind of hazing ritual for new guards. The whole "he isn't human" thing was just too much. I snorted and tucked the paper into my pocket. For the next few hours, I alternated between watching YouTube videos on my phone and glancing up at the monitors. Nothing moved except the occasional paper cup blown by the breeze. Around midnight, I made a cup of instant coffee and pulled out a textbook I'd brought along, figuring I might as well get some summer reading done. The night crawled by. At one point, I thought I saw movement on the Ferris wheel camera, but it was just a shadow from a nearby tree. I checked all the other monitors, nothing but empty pathways and silent rides. I pulled out Melvin's list again, shaking my head. Rule number 1, Ignore the Ferris wheel after 12:30 a.m. What was that even supposed to mean? And calling the police about some guy in a red hat? The whole thing was ridiculous. My second night went pretty much the same as the first. I brought my laptop and watched 2 movies back to back while occasionally glancing at the monitors. Nothing happened. Not a single person tried to break in. No mysterious figures appeared, and certainly no non-human entities knocked on the door. By my third night, I'd already settled into a comfortable routine. I brought snacks, set up my laptop, and barely paid attention to the monitors at all. This job was turning out to be exactly what I'd hoped for. Easy money for doing basically nothing. As I munched on chips and scrolled through social media, I couldn't help but laugh about those rules again. I'd been worried about this job being boring, but at least Melvin had given me something to chuckle about. Whatever weirdo had written that list had a pretty dark sense of humor. I leaned back in the chair, putting my feet up on the desk. 3 more hours until my shift ended, and then I'd head home to sleep until noon. Summer jobs didn't get much easier than this. The monitors continued to show the same empty park scenes they had for the past 2 nights. Nothing moved, nothing changed. I turned back to my laptop, completely relaxed. This was going to be the easiest tuition money I'd ever earned. I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and headed toward the staff entrance. Third night on the job, and I'd already settled into a comfortable routine. The park looked exactly the same as it had the previous nights. Empty food stalls, darkened game booths, and that weird silence that hung over places meant to be filled with noise. The security office waited for me just like before. 6 monitors on the wall, swivel chair that squeaked when I sat down, mini fridge humming in the corner. I tossed my backpack onto the desk and pulled out my laptop, a bag of chips, and the energy drink I'd picked up on the way over. Home sweet home for the next 4 hours, I muttered to myself as I dropped into the chair. I popped open my laptop and connected to the Wi-Fi. The password was still stuck to the underside of the keyboard on that faded yellow sticky note. I glanced up at the monitors, all 6 showing the same empty scenes I'd been staring at for 2 nights now. Main entrance locked up tight, carousel sitting still, water slides looking creepy without people, bumper cars frozen in place, food court completely deserted, and the Ferris wheel standing tall against the night sky. I pulled up Netflix and found where I'd left off in my show last night. The folded paper with Melvin's rules crinkled in my pocket as I shifted in the chair. I'd almost forgotten about them. I fished out the paper and smoothed it on the desk next to my laptop. The 6 typed items stared back at me. 1. Ignore Ferris wheel after 12:30 a.m. Do not look at monitors. 2. Call police immediately if man in red baseball cap appears outside main gate. 3. Turn off all monitors for exactly 2 minutes if child seen near carousel. 4. Do not open door for woman looking for son. 5. Do open door for tall man in dark suit who doesn't speak. 6. Leave park by 3 a.m. with no exceptions. I snorted and crumpled the paper back into my pocket. 2 nights of absolutely nothing had proven these were just Melvin's idea of a joke. Probably some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy. For the next hour, I alternated between my show and occasional glances at the monitors. Nothing changed. No mysterious figures, no supernatural entities, no reason to do anything but enjoy the easiest money I'd ever made toward next semester's tuition. I checked my phone. 12:35, almost halfway through my shift. Something on monitor 3 caught my eye. The Ferris wheel was moving? I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The massive wheel was rotating slowly, which was weird enough, but what really grabbed my attention were the lights. They weren't just on, they were flashing in strange patterns. Blues, reds, and yellows pulsed in a sequence that seemed to follow some rhythm I couldn't quite place. "What the hell?" I whispered. The colors swirled and danced across the screen. The longer I watched, the more the pattern seemed to make sense, like there was a message hidden in the way the lights chased each other around the wheel. I felt my eyes growing heavy, not from tiredness, but from something else. A pull, like the lights were trying to draw me in. I blinked hard and shook my head. Something about this felt wrong. The first rule on Melvin's list suddenly popped into my head. Ignore Ferris wheel after 12:30 a.m. Do not look at monitors. It's just a mechanical glitch, I told myself, but my voice sounded distant in my own ears. I forced myself to look away from monitor 3, focusing instead on the empty main entrance shown on monitor 1. My eyes kept trying to drift back to the Ferris wheel. The urge to watch those hypnotic lights was so strong it actually made my head hurt to resist. I grabbed my phone and checked the time again, 12:42. The Ferris wheel shouldn't be moving at all. The park had been closed for hours, and the power to the rides was supposed to be off. Focus on something else, I muttered, turning back to my laptop. I tried to concentrate on my show, but the colors from monitor 3 kept pulling at the edge of my vision. I adjusted my chair so my back was to that particular screen. That helped a little, but I could still feel it there, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I put in my earbuds and turned up the volume on my show, determined to ignore whatever was happening with the Ferris wheel. For the next half hour, I forced myself to stare at my laptop screen, only allowing quick glances at the other 5 monitors. By 1 in the morning, the strange pull had faded. I risked a look at monitor 3. The Ferris wheel stood motionless again, its lights dark. Had I imagined the whole thing? Maybe I'd dozed off for a minute and dreamed it. I stretched and decided to make some of the instant coffee from the supply drawer. As the hot water from the ancient coffee maker filled my cup, I paced around the small office, working out the stiffness in my legs. Back in my chair with the coffee warming my hands, I settled in for the second half of my shift. 2 more hours and I could head home to my bed. The coffee tasted terrible, but it would keep me awake. At 1:15, I noticed movement on monitor 5. I straightened in my chair, suddenly alert. Someone was at the main gate. I leaned closer to the screen, coffee forgotten on the desk. A man stood outside the entrance, his hand on the metal bars of the gate. Even with the grainy quality of the security camera, I could make out the red baseball cap he wore pulled low over his face. Middle-aged, medium build, wearing a dark jacket. The second rule flashed in my mind. Call police immediately if man in red baseball cap appears outside main gate. No way, I whispered. This can't be happening. The man rattled the gate hard, testing the lock. His movements were aggressive, angry. He looked up toward the security office, and even though I knew he couldn't possibly see me through the windows at this distance, I felt exposed. He rattled the gate again, harder this time. My hands shook as I reached for the phone on the desk. Was this really happening? 2 of Melvin's rules coming true in one night? I dialed 911, my eyes never leaving monitor 5. The man in the red cap was now moving along the fence line, looking for another way in. 911, what's your emergency? A woman's voice answered. Hi, I'm a security guard at Wonderland Park, I said, my voice higher than normal. There's someone trying to break in at the main gate, a man in a red baseball cap. Is he armed? The dispatcher asked calmly. I don't know. I can only see him on the security camera. He's trying to get through the gate. What's your name, sir? Stanley Shaw. I'm the night security guard. Okay, Stanley. My name is Officer Emily Snyder. I'm sending units to your location. Are you somewhere safe? Yeah, I'm locked in the security office near the center of the park. Good, stay there. Can you still see the individual on your cameras? I glanced at monitor 5. The man had moved to a section of fence partially hidden by trees, but I could still make out his red cap. Yes, he's still there, looking for a way in. Officers are on their way, Stanley. They should arrive in about 15 minutes. Can you stay on the line with me? Yes, I said, unable to look away from the screen. I'll stay on the line. The man in the red cap turned toward the camera again, and even through the grainy footage, I could swear he was looking right at me. A chill ran through me as I realized Melvin's rules might not be a joke after all. Officer Snyder's voice came through my phone, steady and professional. "Units are on their way to your location, Mr. Shaw. ETA, approximately 12 minutes. Please remain on the line and continue monitoring the situation." "Okay," I said, my eyes locked on monitor 5 where the man in the red baseball cap continued checking the fence line. He's still there, looking for a way in. I can see his cap through the trees. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the red spot visible between branches. The cameras weren't exactly high definition, more like grainy security footage from a convenience store, but that distinctive cap stood out clearly against the darkness. "Mr. Shaw, are you still there?" Officer Snyder asked. "Yeah, sorry. He's by the east fence now, where there's that cluster of pine trees. I stopped mid-sentence. Wait a second. The red cap had vanished. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. "Mr. Shaw?" "He's gone," I said, pressing my face closer to monitor 5. "I don't see him anymore. When did you last have visual contact?" "Literally seconds ago. He was right there by the trees, and now, nothing." I grabbed the mouse and clicked through the camera controls, zooming in on the area where I'd last seen him. The fence line stood empty. The trees swayed slightly in the night breeze, but there was no sign of movement, no flash of red, nothing. "I'm checking the other cameras," I told Officer Snyder, clicking through each monitor frantically. Monitor 1 showed the main entrance, locked and empty. Monitor 2 displayed the silent carousel, its painted horses frozen in mid-gallop, the water slides on 3, bumper cars on 4, and the food court on 6 all appeared deserted. I cycled through them twice more, growing increasingly panicked. "He's not on any of the cameras. I can't find him anywhere in the park." "Is there any chance he left the premises?" Officer Snyder asked. "I don't know. Maybe?" I ran a hand through my hair, but I was watching the whole time. He didn't walk away. He just disappeared. "Officers Arnold and Singh should be arriving shortly. Please stay in your secure location until they make contact." I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I'll stay put." The next 10 minutes crawled by at an excruciating pace. I kept cycling through the camera feeds, searching for any sign of the man in the red cap. Each empty frame only heightened my anxiety. Had I imagined him? No, he'd been right there, trying to break in. I hadn't made that up. A sharp knock at the office door made me jump. I peered through the small window to see 2 uniformed officers standing outside. A tall man with close-cropped black hair and a shorter woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "Security," called a male voice. "Seaside Heights Police, open up, please." I unlocked the door with shaking hands. "Officers Arnold and Singh," said the male officer, flashing his badge. "We received a call about a potential intruder on the premises." "Yeah, that was me," I said, stepping back to let them enter. "I'm Stanley Shaw, night security." Officer Arnold looked around the small office while Officer Singh took out a notepad. "Can you describe what you saw?" she asked. I pointed to monitor 5. There was a man in a red baseball cap trying to get in through the fence. He was checking different sections, looking for a weak spot or something. I watched him for about 5 minutes before I called. "And where exactly did you last see this individual?" Officer Arnold asked, his tone neutral but with an undercurrent of skepticism that made my stomach knot. "By the east fence near those pine trees," I said, pointing to the screen. "He was there 1 second, gone the next." The officers exchanged a glance that I couldn't quite read. "Mind if we take a look around the perimeter?" Officer Arnold asked. "Please do," I said. "I can give you directions through the park from here." "That won't be necessary," Officer Singh said. "We'll do a standard sweep." They left the office, and I watched them on the monitors as they methodically checked the fence line, shining flashlights into bushes and examining the gates. After about 20 minutes, they returned. "We found no signs of forced entry," Officer Arnold reported. "The fence is intact and there are no footprints or disturbed vegetation around the perimeter." "But he was there," I insisted. "I saw him clearly." Officer Singh's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Shaw, sometimes the night shift can play tricks on your mind. These old security systems aren't always reliable either." "I know what I saw," I said, trying not to sound defensive. "We'll file a report," Officer Arnold said, his tone making it clear he was humoring me. "If you see anything else suspicious, don't hesitate to call again." "You might want to ask your manager about upgrading the security system," Officer Singh added. "Some of these older cameras can glitch or show interference that looks like movement." They took my statement, asked a few more questions about the park security measures, and then left. The whole interaction left me feeling embarrassed and doubtful. Had I really seen someone, or was it just shadows and my imagination working overtime? I checked the time, 1:45, still over an hour before I could leave. I sighed and turned back to the monitors, taking a sip of my now cold coffee. That's when I saw it. On monitor 2, standing perfectly still beside the carousel, was a small boy. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers and crashed to the floor, splashing liquid across my shoes. I barely noticed. The boy looked about 8 years old and wore clothes that seemed oddly formal and old-fashioned, short pants with suspenders over a button-up shirt. But what made my skin crawl wasn't his clothing, it was his skin. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could see that his skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, with a faint glow under the camera's infrared lighting. He wasn't moving, not even slightly, just standing there, staring directly at the camera as if he knew I was watching him. Rule 3, the third rule on Melvin's list, flashed through my mind. Turn off all monitors for exactly 2 minutes if child seen near carousel. My hand shot out toward the monitor controls before I could second-guess myself. I hit the main power switch and all 6 screens went black at once. The office plunged into near darkness, with only the red emergency light above the door casting a dim glow across the room. My heart hammered in my chest as I fumbled for my phone. I activated the timer function with trembling fingers and set it for 2 minutes. Then I sat in the dark, counting each second as it ticked by on the screen. 1, 2, 3. The coffee puddle spread slowly across the linoleum floor. 27, 28. Something creaked outside in the park. 45, 46. Was that footsteps in the hallway? 61, 62. My mouth felt dry as dust. 90, 91. The red emergency light flickered once, twice. 115, 116. Just a few more seconds. 120. The timer on my phone beeped, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. 2 minutes exactly. Following the rule to the letter, I reached for the power switch and hesitated for just a moment. What would I see when the monitors came back on? The boy still standing there, something worse. I hit the power switch and the 6 monitors flickered back to life one by one. I scanned them quickly, my heart still pounding as I focused on monitor 2, the carousel. Empty. Completely empty. I leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. The carousel stood motionless under the dim security lights, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop. No pale boy in old-fashioned clothes. No one at all. I checked the other monitors too. Main entrance, water slides, bumper cars, east fence, food court, all vacant. Whatever, whoever that boy had been, he was gone now. The 2-minute blackout had worked exactly like the rules said it would. My shirt clung to my back, wet with sweat, even though the office air conditioning kept the room at a constant 65 degrees. I slumped back in the chair, which gave its familiar squeak. The rules, Melvin's stupid rules that I'd laughed at for 2 nights straight. I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket and smoothed it out on the desk. The typed text looked ordinary enough, just black letters on white paper. But there was nothing ordinary about what was happening. The Ferris wheel really had lit up and started moving on its own. The man in the red baseball cap had appeared exactly where the rules warned he might, and now the boy by the carousel. Jesus, I whispered to the empty room. I wasn't being hazed. These weren't jokes or tests. They were actual warnings about things that happened in this park after dark, things that shouldn't be possible. I checked the time on my phone, 2:10 in the morning, less than an hour until I could leave. I just needed to make it to 3. That's when I heard it, a woman's voice, soft but clear, coming from the hallway outside the office door. "Hello? Is anyone in there? Please, I need help." I froze, my eyes darting to the door. Through its small rectangular window, I could make out a figure standing in the dimly lit corridor. "Please," she called again, her voice cracking. "I'm looking for my son. His name is Tommy. Have you seen him? They told me he might be here." I rose slowly from my chair, my legs feeling strangely heavy. I moved closer to the door but stopped several feet away. Through the window, I could see her clearly now, a middle-aged woman with brown hair that hung in tangled strands around her face. She wore a faded blue dress that looked like it had once been nice but now hung loosely on her thin frame. Her eyes were wide and desperate, darting back and forth as she scanned the hallway. My first instinct was to help her. What kind of person would I be if I ignored a mother looking for her lost child? But then Rule 4 flashed in my mind. Do not open door for woman looking for son. The woman spotted me through the window, and her expression brightened with hope. She rushed to the door, her hands pressing against it. "Oh, thank goodness. Please, you have to help me find Tommy. He's only 8 years old. He was wearing his Sunday clothes, you know, the little suspenders and button-up shirt his grandmother bought him." She knocked on the door, a polite tap at first. "Please open the door. I've been looking for hours." I swallowed hard. Her description matched exactly what I'd seen on the monitor, the boy by the carousel in old-fashioned clothes. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'll look for your son. I have cameras all over the park. If I see him, I'll let you know right away." Her knocking grew more insistent, her knuckles rapping sharply against the wood. "No, please, you don't understand. I need to come in. I need to see the cameras myself. A mother knows her child, please." "I'm sorry, but I can't open the door. It's against security protocol." The lie came easily, but I felt terrible saying it. Her eyes were red-rimmed, filled with the raw panic that only a parent who's lost a child could feel. "Protocol?" Her voice hardened slightly. "What kind of protocol stops someone from helping a mother find her missing child?" The knocking became pounding. "Let me in. I just want my Tommy back." I took a step backward. "I promise I'm looking for him. I'll call park management and the police if needed." For 20 minutes, she alternated between begging and demanding. She described Tommy in heartbreaking detail, the dimple on his right cheek when he smiled, how he was afraid of the dark but wouldn't admit it, the way he always wanted one more bedtime story. "He likes the carousel," she said, her voice softer now, almost dreamy. "He always picks the black horse with the gold mane, says it runs the fastest." Her eyes met mine through the glass. "Have you checked the carousel? He might be waiting there for me." A chill ran through me. I'd just seen a boy at the carousel, and now here was his mother, describing him in perfect detail. But according to the rules, I couldn't let her in. According to the rules, she wasn't what she appeared to be. "I'm checking all the cameras," I assured her, staying well back from the door. "If I see him, I'll make an announcement over the PA system. He'll hear it wherever he is in the park." Her face changed then, just slightly. Something flickered behind her eyes, a darkness that hadn't been there before. Her knocking stopped. "You're not going to help me, are you?" she asked, her voice suddenly flat. I didn't answer. "Everyone says they'll help, but no one ever does." She pressed her face closer to the window, and I noticed her skin looked waxy under the fluorescent lights. "He's been missing for so long, so very long." She stayed there, staring at me, occasionally calling Tommy's name or asking me questions about whether I'd seen him. I kept giving her the same answers, promising to look but refusing to open the door. At 2:30, her voice began to fade, growing softer until I could barely hear her. When I looked through the window again, the hallway was empty. She'd vanished as suddenly as she'd appeared. I rushed to the monitors, cycling through all 6 cameras. Main entrance, carousel, water slides, bumper cars, east fence, food court, all empty. No sign of the woman in the blue dress, no sign of Tommy. It was as if neither of them had ever existed. I sank back into my chair, my legs finally giving out. 3 of the 6 rules had now proven true. I had no reason to doubt the others. The clock on the wall showed 2:35, just 25 more minutes until I could leave. 25 minutes to get through this night alive. I heard 3 deliberate knocks on the door. My head snapped up from the rules paper I'd been staring at, and my stomach dropped. The knocks weren't frantic like someone desperate for help. They were measured, confident, 3 evenly spaced raps that seemed to echo through the tiny security office. I checked the time on my phone, 2:35 a.m., 25 minutes until I could leave. The knocks came again, exactly the same as before. I got up from my chair and approached the door slowly, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. When I reached the rectangular window, I peered through the glass. A tall man in a dark suit stood perfectly still outside. He didn't fidget or shift weight like a normal person would. He just waited. The hallway lights cast shadows across his face, making his features hard to make out clearly. But something about the way he stood, so unnaturally rigid, made my skin crawl. His shoulders were too square, his posture too perfect. No human stands that still. My mind raced back to Melvin's rules. Number 5. Do open door for tall man in dark suit who doesn't speak. The paper had specifically noted this visitor wasn't human but should be allowed inside. I swallowed hard. 4 rules had already proven true. I had no reason to doubt this one. My hand shook as I reached for the lock. The metal felt ice cold against my sweaty fingers. I turned the deadbolt, hearing the heavy click as it disengaged, then wrapped my trembling fingers around the doorknob. "Hello?" I said, pulling the door open a few inches. The man didn't respond. He didn't even blink. He just stared at me, or through me. It was hard to tell. Up close, I could see his face better, but it was wrong somehow. His skin looked waxy under the fluorescent lights, his features too symmetrical. I stepped back, opening the door wider. "You can come in." He moved forward in a single fluid motion that didn't match how people normally walk. His legs moved, but there was something off about the rhythm, like watching a nature documentary where they slow down a cheetah running, showing how its spine flexes. Each movement flowed into the next, without the normal stops and starts of human movement. The tall man glided past me without acknowledgement, not even turning his head in my direction. The air temperature seemed to drop several degrees as he passed. I closed the door behind him, my hand still shaking. He moved directly toward the wall of monitors, stopping exactly in the center of the display. His back was to me now, and I noticed how perfectly the suit fit his frame. Too perfectly, like it wasn't fabric at all, but part of him. I backed up until my legs hit the chair, then sat down heavily. The tall man began examining each screen methodically, starting with monitor 1 showing the main entrance, then moving to the carousel, water slides, bumper cars, east fence, and finally, the food court. He spent exactly the same amount of time on each screen, his head tilting at precisely the same angle for everyone. The office was completely silent except for the hum of the monitors and my own shallow breathing. I tried to make as little noise as possible. As he studied the screens, I noticed something else. The small mirror mounted on the wall near the bathroom door reflected the back of my chair and my own pale face. But where the tall man should have been standing, there was nothing. No reflection at all. My mouth went dry. I gripped the arms of my chair to keep my hands from shaking more obviously. The tall man continued his inspection for exactly 5 minutes. I know because I couldn't stop staring at my phone's clock, watching each minute tick by with excruciating slowness. He never made a sound, no breathing, no clothes rustling, no shoes on the linoleum floor. When he finished with the last monitor, he turned in one smooth motion and glided, back toward the door. His movements had that same unnatural fluidity, like he was floating just millimeters above the ground. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. He simply opened the door, stepped through, and closed it behind him with a soft click. I sat frozen in my chair for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. Then I jumped up and rushed to lock the door again, fumbling with the deadbolt until I heard it slide securely into place. Back at my desk, I collapsed into the chair. My shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool air conditioning. I checked the time again. 2:40 a.m. 20 minutes to go. Every tiny sound in the office now seemed amplified. The hum of the mini fridge sounded like a jet engine. The occasional tick from the wall clock made me jump. A shadow cast by my own arm moving across the desk sent my heart racing. I kept looking at the door, half expecting those 3 measured knocks to come again. My eyes darted between all 6 monitors, searching for any sign of the tall man in the dark suit, but all the screens showed empty, still areas of the park. At one point, I swore I saw movement in the corner of my eye, a dark shape passing behind me, but when I spun around, nothing was there. Just the bathroom door, slightly ajar, casting a wedge of darkness across the floor. The minutes crawled by. I flinched when the ancient coffee maker suddenly clicked off, its warming plate cooling down. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and shift, though I knew it was just my imagination working overtime. I couldn't stop thinking about the tall man's lack of reflection, about how he moved, about what he might actually be under that perfectly fitted suit. At 2:55 a.m., I started gathering my things. I shoved my laptop into my backpack with shaking hands, not even bothering to shut it down properly. I crammed the rules paper into my pocket and zipped up my jacket despite the sweat still beading on my forehead. 5 more minutes. I just needed to make it 5 more minutes, and then I could leave this place behind until tomorrow night. I stood by the door, keys in hand, backpack over my shoulder, watching the seconds tick down on my phone. Every small creak from the building made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move just at the edge of my vision. I watched the wall clock tick to 3 in the morning, my gaze fixed on the second hand as it completed its final rotation. The moment it hit the 12, I grabbed my keys from the desk and bolted for the door. I didn't look back at the security office as I ran down the hallway. My footsteps echoed off the walls, matching the hammering in my chest. The emergency exit lights cast long shadows that seemed to reach for me as I passed. I pushed through the staff entrance and kept running, not slowing down even when the cool night air hit my face. The employee parking lot sat empty, except for my car, a lone island under a flickering lamppost. I fumbled with my keys, dropping them once before finally getting them in my sweaty palm. My hands shook so badly that I missed the lock twice before jamming the key in on the 3rd try. I threw myself into the driver's seat and locked the doors immediately. The key scraped against the ignition as I tried to start the engine. Nothing happened on the first attempt. The second try produced only a weak grinding noise. On the 3rd attempt, the engine finally caught, and I backed out of the space so fast I nearly hit a garbage can. The streets of Seaside Heights were completely deserted at this hour. Streetlights created pools of yellow light on empty sidewalks. Closed storefronts with darkened windows lined both sides of the road. I drove 10 miles over the speed limit the whole way home, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. My mind raced through everything that had happened during my shift. The Ferris wheel, lighting up and spinning on its own after 12:30, pulling at my attention with its hypnotic lights. The man in the red baseball cap prowling the fence line, looking for a way in. The pale boy standing motionless by the carousel, gone when I turned the monitors back on. the woman begging me to open the door to help find her son, the tall man in the dark suit who made no sound when he moved. Every single rule on Melvin's crumpled list had proven true. Every warning had manifested exactly as described. Following those 6 typed rules had kept me alive through my shift. What would have happened if I'd kept watching the Ferris wheel? What if I hadn't called the police about the man in the red cap? What if I'd left the monitors on when I saw the boy, or opened the door for the woman looking for her son? What if I'd refused entry to the tall man who cast no reflection? I slowed at a red light despite the empty intersection, too rattled to risk breaking even a traffic law. The light turned green, and I pressed the gas pedal harder than necessary. Those entities, whatever they were, haunted Wonderland Park after midnight. The child looked like he'd stepped out of another time with his old-fashioned clothes. The desperate mother searching for a son who'd been missing for so long. The man in the red cap who vanished without a trace, and that tall figure who examined the cameras with mechanical precision, who made the air turn cold, who cast no reflection in the mirror. They weren't human. They couldn't be. And they were all probably fatal if not handled according to Melvin's specific instructions. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building as the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon. The sky turned from black to deep blue at the edges, with pink starting to bleed into the clouds. I put the car in park, but didn't turn off the engine right away. I sat there for several minutes, just watching the sunrise through my windshield. The familiar sight of daybreak slowly pushing back the darkness felt reassuring after what I'd experienced. Birds started chirping in the trees nearby. A newspaper delivery car drove past on the street. Normal things, safe things, daytime things. My hands had finally stopped shaking. I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet car, still processing the night's terrifying revelations. Tonight, I'd have to go back and do it all over again. The thought made my stomach turn. But at least now I knew the rules weren't a joke or a hazing ritual. They were a survival guide, and I intended to survive. I got to the park 20 minutes early the next night. I'd barely slept all day, just tossed and turned with images of that tall man's expressionless face floating through my mind whenever I closed my eyes. The whole drive over, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman in the blue dress sitting in my back seat. The employee parking lot was empty except for a single car I recognized as Melvin's, a beat-up Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door. I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and sat there for a minute, hand on the door handle, working up the nerve to go inside. "Just follow the rules," I whispered to myself. "Just do exactly what he told you." The walk to the staff entrance felt longer than usual. The park looked different now that I knew what lurked inside. The darkened rides weren't just powered down for the night. They were waiting. I punched in the security code with shaky fingers and stepped inside. The hallway to the security office stretched ahead, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door, half expecting to see the tall man standing outside it again. Instead, when I reached the office, I saw Melvin through the window, sitting in my chair and staring at the monitors. I knocked on the door. He jumped, then saw me and visibly relaxed. "You're early," he said as I walked in. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, dropping my backpack on the desk. Melvin stood up from my chair, looking me over like he was surprised to see me in one piece. He rubbed the back of his neck and glanced at the monitors. "So, how was last night?" I laughed, but it came out sounding wrong. "You know exactly how it was." "What do you mean?" His eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "Cut the crap, Melvin." The Ferris wheel lit up and started moving at 12:30. A guy in a red baseball cap tried to break in. There was a little boy by the carousel who disappeared when I turned off the monitors. A woman came looking for her son. And then a tall man with no reflection showed up and checked all the cameras. I took a step toward him. "Your rules, every single one of them happened." Melvin's shoulders slumped. He sank back into the chair, looking 10 years older than he had yesterday. "You followed them all?" he asked quietly. Yes. He nodded slowly. Good. That's good. He ran a hand over his face. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. I thought you were messing with me. I wish I was. He looked up at the wall of monitors, each showing a different empty section of the park. I really do. I pulled the crumpled rules paper from my pocket and smoothed it out on the desk. I need you to tell me what's going on. What are these things? Why are they here? What happens if I break the rules? Melvin was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he sighed and pointed to the chair across from him. Sit down, kid. I sat. This place, he began, gesturing vaguely at the monitors, wasn't always an amusement park. The land it's built on, there was a tragedy here, long time ago, before my time. What kind of tragedy? The kind that leaves a mark. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You ever hear stories about places where bad things happened? How sometimes those places stay bad? I nodded. Well, this is one of those places. When they built Wonderland, they disturbed something that should have been left alone. Now we're stuck with them. He nodded toward the monitors. The entities from your rules. Yeah, they follow patterns, show up at the same times, do the same things. That's why the rules work. They're predictable, I guess. I looked at the 6 monitors, each showing a different part of the empty park. It looked so normal, so harmless. Tell me about the Ferris wheel, I said. What happens if I keep watching it after 12:30? Melvin's face darkened. The lights are a trap. They hypnotize you, make you want to go outside. And if you do, he drew a finger across his throat. Nobody ever comes back. I remembered the pull I'd felt, how hard it had been to look away. And the man in the red cap? He was a murderer, Melvin said flatly. Killed a kid here, back when this was just empty land. Story goes he was caught and died trying to escape. Fell into a ravine that used to be where the water slides are now. But he keeps coming back, trying to get in. If he does... Melvin shook his head. Let's just say he's still looking for victims. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. The boy by the carousel, was that... his victim? Yeah. Poor kid's been stuck here ever since. He shows up looking all innocent, but don't be fooled. He's a lure. If you keep watching him, he knows you can see him. Then he'll try to get you to come outside, just like the Ferris wheel. Turn off the monitors like the rules say, and he goes away. Keep them on. Melvin let the sentence hang. What about the woman? I asked, thinking of her desperate face pressed against the glass, her pleas to help find her son. She's not looking for any son, Melvin said grimly. That's just her story. She's angry, vengeful. She was the boy's mother. Went mad with grief after her son was killed. Died of a broken heart or something. Now she's trapped here too, blaming everyone for not saving her boy. Open that door for her and she'll tear you apart. I swallowed hard, remembering how close I'd come to letting her in. And the tall man? The one with no reflection? For the first time, Melvin's expression shifted to something almost like respect. He's different from the others. Some kind of guardian, I think. Keeps the balance. He checks the monitors to make sure everything's where it should be, that the other entities aren't evolving, I guess, breaking their patterns. As long as you follow the rules and let him in when he comes, he'll protect you. He's the only reason any of us survive working here. I stared at Melvin. Why would anyone take this job? Why don't you warn people properly? You think anyone would believe me if I told them the truth up front? He laughed bitterly. They'd think I was crazy, or they'd think it was a joke like you did. Either way, they wouldn't follow the rules, and then they'd die. Has that happened before? Someone breaking the rules? Melvin looked down at his hands. More times than I care to remember. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of what he wasn't saying. So why keep the park open at all? I asked. Why not just shut it down? Money, he said simply. The owners make too much to close it, and the entities only come out at night after closing. As long as we follow the rules, keep them contained. He shrugged. During the day, it's just a normal amusement park. I looked at the rules paper on the desk. 6 simple lines that stood between life and death. I need you to understand something, Stanley, Melvin said, his voice deadly serious. Breaking any of these rules means certain death. Not probably, not maybe, certain. There are no second chances here, no do-overs. You follow the rules exactly, or you don't make it to morning. That's it. I nodded slowly, the full weight of my situation sinking in. And I have to be out by 3 a.m. every night, I said, pointing to the last rule. That's the most important one, Melvin agreed. After 3, they're not bound by their patterns anymore. They can go anywhere, do anything, and they will find you if you're still here. He stood up and headed for the door. My shift starts at 6 a.m. I need to get some sleep. Wait, I called after him. Why are you telling me all this now? Why not last night before my first shift? He paused at the door. Because now I know you'll believe me. He gave me a tired smile. And because you survived. Most don't make it past the first night if they think the rules are a joke. Great, I muttered. Just keep following the rules, kid. You'll be fine. He opened the door, then looked back at me. And Stanley, don't fall asleep, not even for a minute. With that final warning, he left, closing the door behind him. I heard the deadbolt lock click as I turned it. I sat down in the chair and faced the wall of monitors, the rules paper clutched in my hand. The park looked peaceful, empty. But I knew better now. I knew what was waiting out there in the dark. I checked my phone. 10:15. Almost 2 hours until the Ferris wheel would light up. Almost 2 hours of quiet before the night's horrors began. I took out my laptop, but didn't open it. Instead, I stared at the monitors, mentally rehearsing the rules over and over. No mistakes tonight. No hesitation. The wall clock ticked loudly in the silence, counting down the minutes until 12:30. I kept a journal after that first night. Nothing fancy. Just a small spiral-bound notebook where I jotted down times, descriptions, patterns. It started as a survival mechanism. If I was going to make it through this summer job without ending up like whoever came before me, I needed to understand these things better than Melvin's crumpled list of rules. July 12th. Ferris wheel activated at 12:32. Lights cycled blue, red, yellow, blue in 4-second intervals, turned away immediately. July 15th. Woman appeared at 1:15 asking for Tommy. Spoke for 18 minutes. Voice changed pitch when I refused entry. Said, he's been waiting 62 years before leaving. July 19th. Tall man inspected monitors for exactly 5 minutes. Temperature dropped 12 degrees during visit. Left without acknowledgement. The entries continued page after page, each night bringing the same visitors in slightly different variations. The red cap man sometimes rattled the east gate, sometimes the north. The boy appeared by different carousel animals. Small changes, but the core patterns held steady. I tapped my pen against the open journal, waiting for midnight to pass. My shift had settled into a grim routine. Arrive by 10, prepare mentally until 12:30, then navigate the parade of horrors until 3. I'd gotten better at managing my fear. Not eliminating it, that would be impossible, but containing it, using it to stay sharp. Movement caught my eye. I looked up at monitor 4 showing the funhouse entrance. A figure stood there that didn't match any of my journal entries. A clown. Not the friendly, colorful kind from birthday parties. This one wore dingy white makeup with exaggerated black eyebrows that arched toward a receding hairline. Its mouth stretched into an impossibly wide smile revealing yellowed teeth. The costume looked decades old. Faded red and blue diamond pattern, ruffled collar stained with something dark. I flipped frantically through my journal pages, then grabbed Melvin's rules from my backpack. Nothing about a clown, nothing about the funhouse. My heart pounded as I looked back at the monitor. The The clown tilted its head, still smiling, then raised one gloved hand and waved directly at the camera. "Shit," I whispered, dropping my pen. "Shit, shit, shit." The clown took a step forward, then another. It moved with jerky, uneven steps, like a wind-up toy with damaged gears. I watched, paralyzed, as it left the funhouse area and entered the main pathway. It was coming toward the security office. I had no protocol for this. The rules covered the Ferris wheel, the man in the red cap, the boy, the woman, and the tall guardian. Nothing else. What was I supposed to do with a nightmare clown that wasn't on the list? The clown stopped suddenly, head snapping up like it heard something. It turned toward camera 3, revealing a grotesque profile. The back of its head looked partially caved in, though the makeup and wig partially concealed the deformity. Then it started laughing. The security feed had no audio, but I could see its shoulders shaking, mouth opening wider than any human mouth should stretch. Even without sound, that laugh crawled up my spine. I watched it resume walking toward the office, moving faster now. My mind raced through options. Should I turn off the monitors like with the boy? Lock the door like with the woman? Let it in like the tall man? The clown disappeared from monitor 4's view. I quickly checked the other screens. Nothing on 1, 2, 3, or 5. Then it appeared on 6, the camera closest to the security office hallway. It was almost here, and I had no idea what to do. A knock came at the door, 3 quick raps that made me jump out of my chair. I backed away, pressing myself against the monitor wall. This wasn't in the rules. This wasn't in my journal. I was completely unprepared. The doorknob rattled. Through the small rectangular window, I caught a glimpse of white face paint and that horrible stretched smile. The clown pressed its face against the glass, flattening its features in a way that looked painful. One bloodshot eye stared directly at me. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My mind had gone completely blank with terror. Then something changed in the hallway light. A shadow fell across the door, and the clown's expression shifted from amusement to alarm. It jerked away from the window. A familiar figure appeared behind it, tall, perfectly still, dressed in an immaculate dark suit. The Guardian. It had never appeared this early in my previous shifts, and never outside its usual pattern. The clown spun to face the tall man, its movements suddenly frantic. I couldn't see clearly through the small window, but their confrontation played out in shifting shadows across the hallway wall. The Guardian made no visible movements, yet the clown seemed to struggle against some invisible force, its limbs jerking at unnatural angles. Then came a sound that penetrated even the office's thick door, a scream unlike anything I'd ever heard. Not human, not animal, but something between frequencies that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The hallway lights flickered wildly. When they stabilized, the clown was gone. Only the tall Guardian remained, standing motionless outside my door. It turned with mechanical precision and looked through the window directly at me. For the first time in all my encounters, it acknowledged my presence with a single, deliberate nod. Then it turned and walked away, footsteps making no sound on the linoleum floor. I collapsed back into my chair, shaking uncontrollably. I grabbed my journal with trembling hands and wrote, August 3rd, 1:17 a.m., new entity. Clown figure at funhouse, approached office, Guardian intervened. Entity destroyed, Guardian acknowledged me for first time. The rest of that night passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The rules were incomplete. There were things even Melvin didn't know. August 15th marked my final night at Wonderland Park. Summer was ending, and I'd be heading back to campus next week. Part of me felt relief. I'd survived the summer job from hell. Another part felt strangely reluctant to leave. I'd become something of an expert on the park's nightlife, and my journal had grown thick with observations and patterns. I arrived for my shift at the usual time, settled into the chair, and opened my journal to a fresh page. Just one more night of following the rules, then back to normal life. Classes, parties, regular sleep patterns, things that had seemed mundane before but now felt like luxuries. The first few hours passed quietly, too quietly. By midnight, I'd normally have at least seen some movement on the monitors, a shadow here or there, but tonight everything remained perfectly still. I checked each screen carefully, but the park looked genuinely empty. At 12:30 exactly, without the usual gradual start, the Ferris wheel erupted into light and motion. Not the subtle hypnotic pattern I'd documented dozens of times, but a violent, chaotic spinning that made the entire structure creak and sway. The lights flashed in seizure-inducing bursts, nothing like the methodical sequences I'd recorded. I quickly looked away, following Rule 1, but the commotion drew my attention to Monitor 5, where the man in the red baseball cap had appeared at the main gate. Unlike his usual testing of perimeters, tonight he was throwing himself against the gate with frenzied intensity, then moving to the next entrance to do the same. I reached for the phone to call the police as the rules dictated, but stopped when I noticed Monitor 2. The boy stood by the carousel, but he wasn't in his usual spot. He was actually walking, in a wide circle around the entire park grounds. In all my observations, I'd never seen him move from his position by the carousel. Before I could process this, a wail came from outside the office door, the woman looking for Tommy. Her voice wasn't the manipulative pleading I'd grown accustomed to. Tonight it was raw, primal grief that rose in volume until it became physically painful to hear. All four entities active simultaneously. It had never happened before. I checked my watch. 1:45 a.m. Still over an hour until my safe departure time. The Ferris wheel spun faster, parts of it looking ready to break free. The man in the red cap had found a maintenance tool and was using it to smash at the entrance locks. The boy had completed a full circuit of the park and was starting a second. The woman's wails reached a pitch that made the office windows vibrate. My journal lay forgotten as I watched the monitors in horror. This wasn't just unusual activity, it was unprecedented chaos. I checked the calendar on my phone, looking for anything special about August 15th. Full moon? No. Anniversary of some tragedy? Not that Melvin had mentioned. The hours crawled by as the supernatural storm raged outside. I stayed rooted to my chair, following the only rule that seemed applicable: stay inside until 3. The entities grew more frantic as the hour approached. At 2:55, the red cap man had nearly broken through the main gate. The boy had picked up speed, now running around the park perimeter. The woman's screams became words I couldn't quite make out, repeated over and over. Then my watch beeped. 3:00 a.m. Everything stopped instantly. The Ferris wheel froze mid-rotation. The man in the red cap vanished mid-swing. The boy disappeared between one camera frame and the next. The woman's wails cut off mid-scream. The sudden silence felt more unnerving than the chaos. I gathered my belongings with shaking hands, tucked my journal into my backpack, and approached the door cautiously. 3 a.m. meant safety. 3 a.m. meant I could leave. The rules had never failed me. I turned the deadbolt and stepped into the hallway. It was empty and silent, lit by the same fluorescent lights as always. I made my way toward the staff exit, half expecting something to jump out at every corner. Nothing did. When I pushed open the exit door to the employee parking lot, I wasn't alone. Melvin Allen stood waiting, hands in his pockets, looking more alert than I'd ever seen him during day shifts. "You made it," he said simply. "Yeah?" I adjusted my backpack strap. "Last night." Melvin nodded, looking at me with an appraising expression I couldn't quite read. "That was quite a finale they put on for you." I stopped. "You know about that?" I watched the security feed from my laptop at home. I do that sometimes, especially on important nights. "Important how?" I asked, suddenly wary. Melvin gestured to a bench near the staff entrance. "Let's sit for a minute." I hesitated but followed him to the bench. The night air felt cool after hours in the stuffy office. "Stanley," he began, You weren't just hired as a summer security guard." "What do you mean?" "You were being tested." Melvin looked toward the dark, silent park. "The owners of Wonderland need someone who can handle the night shift permanently, someone who understands what happens here and can manage it." I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "You're offering me a job? To stay here with those things?" "Not just a job, management position. Good salary, benefits." He turned to face me directly. "You kept a journal, didn't you?" I instinctively touched my backpack where the notebook sat. "How did you know?" "Because you're thorough, methodical. You don't just follow rules, you try to understand them." Melvin pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "The park needs a night manager, someone who's seen everything and still comes back, someone who's earned the Guardian's respect." "The tall man?" I remembered its nod the night it confronted the clown. "Yes, that was significant. It doesn't acknowledge just anyone." Melvin stood up. "Think about it. Call that number when you've decided. The position starts after you finish college." I looked down at the card, embossed with the Wonderland logo and a phone number. "Why me? Why not you?" Melvin smiled tiredly. "Because I'm getting too old for this, and because the Guardian chose you. Tonight confirmed it." He walked toward his car, leaving me sitting on the bench with a business card and a head full of questions. I looked back at the dark silhouette of the park against the night sky. For 3 months, I'd counted the days until I could leave this place behind. Now I had to decide if I'd come back. I graduated college 2 years after that final summer night shift at Wonderland Park. My life had moved on. I'd finished my business degree, interviewed at a few accounting firms, and even lined up a decent starting position at one in Newark. But that business card from Melvin stayed in my wallet the whole time. It wasn't that I thought about the park constantly. Most days, I managed to focus on classes or friends or whatever Netflix show I was binging, but some nights I'd wake up at exactly 3 in the morning, heart racing, half expecting to see the tall man standing at the foot of my bed. I called the number 2 weeks before graduation. Melvin picked up on the second ring like he'd been waiting. "I figured you might call," he said, not bothering with hello. "Position's still open." 3 weeks later, I was back at Wonderland Park, this time with a new title, Night Manager. The security office looked exactly the same squeaky chair, same humming mini fridge, same 6 monitors on the wall. But I wasn't the same person who'd sat there 2 years ago, jumping at shadows and barely understanding what I was seeing. My first official act as night manager was creating a proper rule book. I started with Melvin's original 6 rules, typed them up all nice and professional, then began adding my own observations. I'd kept that journal from my summer shifts, filled with detailed notes on timing, behaviors, and patterns. Those scribbled observations became the foundation for what eventually grew into a 30-page manual. Rule 17, I read aloud to my first trainee, a community college student named Marco who needed the money and didn't ask too many questions. If the music from the carousel starts playing backward, immediately cut power to Sector 3 and remain in complete silence for exactly 4 minutes. Marco looked at me like I was insane. I recognized that look. I'd given it to Melvin once. "This is a joke, right?" he asked, flipping through the pages. "Like some kind of hazing thing?" I just smiled. "Let's hope you never have to find out." By the end of my first year as night manager, I'd trained 6 different night guards. Only 3 lasted more than a month. One quit after seeing the boy by the carousel. Another ran out screaming when the woman came looking for Tommy. The third just didn't show up for his shift after encountering the man in the red baseball cap. The ones who stayed were the ones who followed the rules without questioning them too much. I started noticing patterns beyond what Melvin had told me. The supernatural activity followed lunar cycles. During new moons, we might go entire shifts with nothing happening. But full moons? Those nights required all hands on deck, with entities appearing earlier, staying longer, and behaving more aggressively. I documented everything in what my staff started calling the Bible, our constantly expanding rule book that grew to include diagrams of the park with danger zones marked in red, calendars tracking lunar phases, and detailed protocols for each known entity. The tall man, the guardian, as I came to think of him, was the most fascinating. About 6 months into my new position, I noticed something odd. After his usual inspection of the monitors, he walked to the desk and touched a blank piece of paper I'd left out. When he left, I found a message written in perfect block letters: "New entity approaching, Eastern Fence, midnight, 3 nights." I followed the warning, keeping extra eyes on the Eastern Fence. Sure enough, 3 nights later at midnight, something tried to climb over. Something with too many limbs moving in ways limbs shouldn't move. We shut down all the lights in that section as the Guardian had instructed in a second note, and whatever it was eventually slithered away. After that, communication with the Guardian became somewhat regular, never verbal, always written messages left on whatever paper was available. Sometimes warnings about new threats, sometimes instructions on how to handle existing entities. I began leaving a notebook specifically for these exchanges, which filled up with insights I could never have discovered on my own. Despite my growing knowledge and comfort with the park's supernatural elements, I never, not once, broke the 3 a.m. rule. Whatever happened after that hour remained a mystery I had no interest in solving. Melvin had been clear about that rule above all others, and the Guardian's messages often emphasized it as well. Departure at 3 a.m., no exceptions, no excuses. One message particularly stuck with me. The boundary weakens at 3:01. I cannot protect you then. Around my 18th month as night manager, I noticed something changing with the boy around my 18th month as night manager. I noticed something changing with the boy by the carousel. He appeared at his usual time, but instead of standing motionless, he seemed to be trying to show me something. He pointed repeatedly at a spot behind the carousel's control booth. I mentioned this to no one, but wrote it in my notes for the Guardian. The next night, his message was simple. He seeks resolution. Help him. This was new territory. The rules had always been about avoidance and survival. Turn off monitors, don't open doors, call police. The idea of actively engaging with an entity went against everything I'd learned. Still, I trusted the Guardian. The next time the boy appeared, I didn't turn off the monitors immediately. Instead, I watched as he pointed toward the same spot. I made careful notes about the exact location, then shut down the monitors for the required 2 minutes. The following morning, I arrived at the park before opening hours and went directly to the carousel. Behind the control booth, partially covered by a decorative panel that had been installed during renovations years ago, I found a small, weathered toy soldier. It looked ancient, the kind of toy popular in the 50s, with chipped paint and a missing arm. That night, I brought the toy to the office and placed it on the desk. When the boy appeared on the monitor, I held up the soldier so he could see it. The change was immediate. His usual blank expression shifted into what I can only describe as relief. He nodded once and then, unlike every other night when he'd disappear after I turned off the monitors, he simply faded away, like an old photograph exposed to sunlight. He never appeared again. This changed everything about how I approached my job. With the Guardian's guidance, I began to understand that not all entities were simply threats to be avoided. Some were lost, trapped in patterns they couldn't break without help. The woman looking for Tommy was next. After months of studying her appearances, I noticed she always touched the same spot on the office door, right where a child might reach. On a hunch, I asked the park's maintenance director about the building's history. He mentioned the security office had originally been the park's first aid station when Wonderland opened in the 50s. The next time she appeared, I didn't just refuse to open the door. I spoke to her differently. "He's not here anymore," I said gently. "Tommy found his way home." She stopped her usual pleading and stared at me with those hollow eyes. "I found his toy soldier," I continued. "He wanted me to tell you he's okay now." I'll never forget what happened next. Her face, which had always been twisted with grief and rage, softened. She looked human again, just for a moment. Then she whispered something that wasn't in her usual script. "Thank you." She never returned either. Over the next year, I helped 3 more lost spirits find their way to whatever peace they were seeking. Each resolution seemed to strengthen the boundary the Guardian protected. The violent incidents decreased. The man in the red baseball cap appeared less frequently, and when he did, he seemed weaker, less determined. My college friends were climbing corporate ladders, buying houses, getting married. Meanwhile, I was spending my nights in a security office communicating with a supernatural guardian and helping lost souls find peace. It wasn't exactly what my business degree had prepared me for. My parents thought I was wasting my potential. "Night security at an amusement park," my dad would say during our monthly phone calls. "With your education?" How could I explain that I was doing something that mattered in ways they'd never understand? That I was maintaining a balance between worlds? That lives depended on me showing up each night and following the rules? In my 3rd year as night manager, the Guardian left me the longest message I'd ever received. "You have restored balance where others created chaos." The boundary between worlds was damaged when they built this place of joy atop a place of sorrow. I have guarded the tier between worlds for decades. You are the first to understand that healing, not just guarding, is possible. Some entities cannot be helped, some wounds cannot be healed, but your work has strengthened what was breaking. It was the closest thing to a conversation we'd ever had. I left a response that night. "Why me?" The answer came the next evening. "You followed the rules, but sought to understand them." Rare combination. My life settled into a rhythm unlike anyone else I knew. Days for sleeping and research, nights for my real work. I expanded my staff to 3 trained night guards who rotated shifts. The rulebook grew to over 50 pages, with sections devoted to each entity, lunar phase protocols, and communication methods with the Guardian. One particularly quiet night during a new moon, I found myself alone in the office, no entities to manage, no crises to handle. I pulled out my original journal from that first summer and flipped through the terrified scribbles of my younger self. The contrast between then and now struck me, how I'd gone from a college kid desperate to escape at 3 a.m. to someone who had found his purpose in this strange, dangerous place. I realized I'd never asked Melvin how he'd found me, or why he'd chosen me for that summer job. By the time I returned as night manager, he'd retired to Florida, leaving only a forwarding address for emergencies. I wrote him a letter that night, asking the question that had lingered for years. His response arrived 2 weeks later, a single page with his messy handwriting. "The Guardian chose you, not me. I just did the paperwork. Some people are born to bridge worlds. You're one of them. Be careful, but be proud of what you're doing. Not many get to save lives on both sides of the veil." I taped his letter inside the cover of our rulebook. Last month, we had our first completely quiet full moon. No entities, no incidents, no warnings from the Guardian. Just as I was beginning to worry something was wrong, a new message appeared in our communication notebook. "Healing continues. Your work matters. Some wounds remain. Vigilance always." I understood then that this would be my life's work, not a stepping stone to something else, not a weird chapter before a normal career. This was my calling, maintaining the boundary, helping lost souls, protecting both the living and the dead. I'm 30 years old now, and I've spent nearly a decade managing the night shift at Wonderland Park. My college friends don't really understand what I do. My family thinks I lack ambition. But every morning when I drive home as the sun rises, watching the park transform from a supernatural battleground back into a place of joy and laughter. I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The rules still hang on the wall of the security office, framed now, rather than crumpled in my pocket. We still leave at exactly 3 a.m., no exceptions. Some mysteries remain unsolved, some entities still appear on schedule, and the Guardian still makes his nightly rounds. But thanks to the detailed records I've kept, the training I've provided, and the understanding I've gained, fewer people fear the night at Wonderland Park. Fewer spirits remain trapped in endless, painful loops. The boundary between worlds grows stronger with each passing year. And if you ever find yourself working the night shift at an amusement park and someone hands you a list of strange rules to follow, take them seriously. You might just be stepping into a role you were born to fill, even if you don't know it yet.